Guys, I'm an endurance athlete, and the following speech contains material that may be harmful or traumatizing to some audience. So please, don't imitate, unless you want to make risk to a spectacular catalyst in your life. To be honest, I'm the worst to ask about risk, and this is the reason why. Pain, exaggeration, demolition. Those could be the negative results of taking too many risks. But for me, risk is so necessary to come off victorious. It's always good to start with a disclaimer. But let me introduce myself. I'm Seb, and I'm German and European mountain bike marathon champion. But most important, winner of the toughest gravel race in Europe, called Badlands. Badlands is a 750-kilometer long, single-stage, self-supported bike race through the lonely desert of Spain. Doesn't sound hard to you? Watch this. That was a hell of a ride, I can tell you. I won after painful 43 hours riding my bike without a single break, longer than 10 minutes, seeing a wild boar, and that's a wild boar, standing less than 10 meters away from me. So 10 meters, and we directly looked into each other's eyes. 10 meters, I think that's from my point, I think, to Caro. So 10 meters. Could you imagine that I am your wild boar? And could you imagine what to do in a situation like this? At the end of my talk, I will reveal my strategy, a strategy to embrace risk and make it a catalyst to bring you to human limits. I will take you on a journey through the ups and downs of my life and will show you a 360 picture of my strategy. And this is story one. The sand was running through my fingers. My calves were feeling like one of these Italian mafia guys put some concrete on it. I'm not talking about any movie theater, rather than my Badlands race. I was knocked out heavily after 200 kilometers in the desert of Gore. But wait, didn't I say that I won that race? Yes, you listened correctly. But this is just part one of my story. In 2021, I took the bold opportunity to win that race. And I can remember my first participation as it would have been yesterday. One of the hardest DNFs ever. And by the way, DNF means did not finish. So basically, I never made it to the finish line, or what we say, I scratched from the race. The feeling of not having been good enough, and no one accompanies you into the valley of self-doubt. Having only completed a quarter of the race distance, being completely exhausted, sitting on a curb in the middle of nowhere, you are alone, and you have a lot of time to think about this. And I can tell you, this losing is the most hurtful the day after. Again, this losing is the most hurtful the day after. A day, I call it the L day. One of the most important days of my life, because most people quit on L day, but not me. Not me. So, it's a day when my battery for willpower starts to show up. L day is my driver to put everything on one card, instead of showing up at other races or pushing to maximum limit during a training ride, for example. I take my time and revise to my plan. And if it's time to come back, my battery for willpower is at maximum. And you are asking for the end of the story here? A year after, I came back and I won Badlands with a total lead with more than 2 hours, absolutely dominating the race. So take L day and take it as a charger for your battery of willpower. Fast forward, story 2. I'm in the middle of the Sil Mountain Race in Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan? Have you ever heard about a country named Kyrgyzstan? Or even better, a touristic spot in Kyrgyzstan? No? Don't worry, me not. There are none, for reasons. The Sil Mountain Race is by far the hardest bike race in the world. You can forget about Tour de France. And there are two reasons. The organizers tell you in advance that no matter what, food poisoning, broken leg, you name it, no one will come and pick you up. Messing up there means bad consequences. Simply dropping out and taking a warm taxi to the finish line, or what they call in Kyrgyzstan a horse or a donkey, isn't an option at all. And secondly, the distance and the altitude. So, 2,000 kilometers with 20,000 meters of climbing, that's by the way 2.5 or 3 times climbing Mount Everest, and everything in between 2,000 and 4,000 meters of altitude. So the risk of failing is very high out there, I think. But if you make it, you will earn tremendous respect among all peers. And no one will ever take it away from you. But to be honest, months before the race, people tried to hold me back and make me not start. And I think every one of you knows about a situation like this, that someone wants to hold you back. I think they do it because they don't know about their own capabilities. So they try to transfer their own limits to someone else. But for me, this is a stronger motivator because I can prove that I am the only person who sets his own limits. But let's go back to the race. There were 2 situations that were far beyond my limit. And I'm not talking about that I was hungry or I was tired. No. The first one was at the very beginning, and I was in the lead. In the lead of the hardest bike race in the world. But then, in my first descent, I got into big trouble because of a heavy snowstorm called blizzard. A shelter was the only possibility to save my life. And so I decided to find shelter, what finally cost my lead. And by the way, this one was my shelter. So we are not talking about any hotel or stuff like that. It was just for sleeping in the middle of nowhere. Completely crazy. And then, almost by the end of the race, I crashed hard. I crashed hard and broke my handlebar in 2 pieces. And this is the moment when you realized you raced for 7 days. 7 days through Kyrgyzstan in the middle of nowhere. And that's a point when you're not able to scratch from this race. So I needed to ride the final 150 kilometers with half a handlebar. And trust or told, the final descent of the race was from the 4,000 meter high mountain on a train at midnight, completely dark. So that's not like riding your bike at midnight through Cologne. No, that's a bit more crazy. The final 25 kilometers down to the finish line were insane, but I pushed beyond what I ever could imagine to do so. And in the end, I finished 5th of this race. So take what people see as your limit and add one more. This comes with great risk, but will make you grow. Limit is where you put the limit. And don't let others decide on your limit. And always believe that you can do more. Again, add more to the limit others put on you. Story 3. For me, risk mostly means the risk of failing. I spoke about LA and I spoke about the limits. But something in between is missing here, I think. In 2021, I became German mountain bike marathon national champion. And the truth is that there was one guy to be considered as a top guy and impossible to beat. And the weird thing is that the most unrelaxing state you are having is not the moment when the race starts. It's way in advance. It's the moment when you hit the submit button for registration of the race. That causes a lot of stress because you know it's getting serious. And it's an unbelievable long way to your final destination. And how often does a goal seem way too far away, or way too big, or way too unattainable for you? But believe it, that's the moment when everything begins. You only have one choice you need to make. The long road of blood and hard training. What I did in the morning, for example. That may lead to success, or start lollygagging. Lollygagging? You ask what lollygagging is? Well, that's the warm and relaxing state of procrastination that pushes a lot of people to do nothing and linger. So instead of lollygagging, set a clear path towards success and be clear on what's needed to build your mental strength to stay away from the dark side, or what I call lollygagging. The truth is that this time frame is the longest of all. It's not just about a day or a week. We are talking about years, sometimes decades. And all the risk you need to take is not earning any reward. The longer it takes, the stronger you need to be. But here comes my little extra for you to stay away from the dark side. Find something. Find something that enlightens you. Something that brings some enjoyment to your rocky road. Do you know what my little enjoyment is? Any ideas? One advice? Sometimes in the morning or maybe at noon, but not in the afternoon. Any ideas?
Coffee?
Correct. Correct. It's coffee. It has two benefits. And today I'm talking to a lot of students. So the first one isn't something too new for you. It keeps you awake. How simple is that? Easy. And the second benefit? Any ideas? Any idea? Nothing? Come on. I just love it. The great memory of a good cup of coffee. For example, in the morning at the breakfast table, a good cortado, the smell of the fresh beans. There's nothing better for me. And maybe a cup of coffee at the very end of Badlands would have helped me to identify my wild boar. You can remember my wild boar? To identify my wild boar as a hallucination. Risk alone is not a catalyst. My recipe for a spectacular catalyst is what you have learned today. Combine risk with my 3 L's. Elevate. Take the grief from losing and turn into superpower. Limit. Limit is where you put the limit, and don't let others decide on your limit. And lollygagging. Set a clear path towards success. Work hard on it, and don't procrastinate. And finally, enjoy everything with a good cup of coffee. Good cup of coffee. So, please don't overdo things. For me, the golden recipe is always a balancing act between success and failure. Thanks guys for listening and asking for a coffee outside.